Well, thank you so much for joining us on this very interesting program. We're looking at the 2026 budget analysis program, and my name is Paulson Tindovi. We know that the Minister of Finance was here last week on Friday and unveiled the 253 billion kwacha budget, and this is the plan for 2026. We know that the 2026 budget estimates present a critical opportunity for the government to shape the country's economic future with a focus on debt management and revenue mobilization and strategic expenditure. The budget aims to strike a balance between economic growth and fiscal responsibility. And effective implementation of these plans will be crucial in achieving macroeconomic objective and promoting sustainable development. Welcome to this interesting program, and today we look at economic sustainability. My guest on today's program, I do have Mr. Isaac Mwepopo, who is Executive Director from a very critical organization here in Zambia, and very critical organization, and we're talking about the Center for Trade Policy and Development. Thank you so much, and for waking up early. I know when we were conversating yesterday, you were complaining of traffic and waking up early, but you've managed, and we'll say thank you so much for being here this morning.
Thank you so much, and good morning to all those that are tuned in for this discussion that we're having pertaining to the national budget.
All right, and I should also make mention that in a few minutes' time we'll be joined by Mr. Warren Mwambazi, who is a Member of Parliament for Bwanamkubwa constituency. He is the Public Accounts Committee Chairperson, and I know they are very busy this particular time because they really need to go into details and look at these estimates that were pronounced by the Minister of Finance. And so all portfolio committees are very busy at this particular time. And so beginning 9:30 thereabout, we'll be live and showing these committees as they interact with various stakeholders as they look at the 2026 national budget. How do you look at the 2026 budget, which is about 253 billion kwacha?
Well, the proposed 2026 national budget makes, I think, a strong attempt to respond to some of the challenges that the country has been experiencing, but also taking into consideration some of the gains we have scored in terms of the key reforms that have been undertaken within last year and part of the other years, and also appreciating in terms of the projected potential challenges that we might face, and allocating some resources to just try and ensure that we should be in a position to respond. Examples of some of those challenges includes what has happened in the health sector, where we have seen a withdrawal of funding support from a number of strategic partners, which meant that our government needed to put in place measures that demonstrates our appreciation of the gravity of a position of that kind, and we've seen the budget trying to respond to that. But of course, a budget, as it may be, it also depends on a number of factors which might make it a success or not, and part of those factors are situated more in the actual implementation of the budget. We have the revenue side, we also have the wish list in terms of a number of things that we need to implement, and we also have to take into consideration the uniqueness of 2026. Okay. We are going to the polls in 2026, and we'll have general elections come August in 2026. So it does also bring in a few dynamics with regards to how realistic some of the programs might be, taking into consideration the dynamics of 2026.
Okay. Quite a number of stakeholders are saying this budget, the 253 billion kwacha, is overambitious. Are you one of those organizations that look at it like that?
Not really. I think in many cases when formulating the budget, you often have to look at how much you had projected to spend in a given year. Like in the year 2025, remember getting into 2025, the planned budget was to spend around 171 billion. Plus or minus, but within the year 2025 there were also supplementary budgets that were brought to Parliament for approval, and ultimately it led to our 2025 expected expenditure to go above 200 billion. So if you look at the proposed 2026 national budget hitting a figure as high as 253 billion, it is within realistic range, in the sense that you can't budget at the same amount that you had budgeted for previously, especially looking at some of the challenges that we might face getting into next year might even be bigger than some of the problems or challenges we faced in this year. If you look at some of the pronouncements in the budget, they are also speaking to some of the obligations and commitments that the government will have getting into 2026. Some of them are related to payment of treasury bonds or bills that will be falling due getting into 2026, but some of them are also speaking to growing commitments as a result of the finalization of the debt restructuring process that has been going on. So that in itself ultimately gets to inform the estimates that a country would potentially get to spend in a given financial year in line with its responsibilities, commitments, as well as aspirations.
Well, one of the highlights in the 2026 budget during the presentation last week on Friday, the minister's pronouncements that 82% of the total budget will be collected using, or should I say locally. Do you think that is achievable? 82, because that's huge, and looking at the formal sector that we have in the country, the mines as well, quite all right, they're doing very well, but do you think that is achievable?
In the first place, that's a step in the right direction. I should make mention, domestic resource mobilization is the most sustainable and reliable way of financing our development. That in itself does not negate the fact that all countries, besides mobilizing resources domestically, equally get to borrow from other sources. But financing your development aspiration using resources that are generated domestically is the most sustainable way of financing development. And is it attainable? Yes, it is attainable, especially looking at some of the gains that we have been realizing with regards to the capacity of institutions like the Zambia Revenue Authority to collect taxes from within the country. In more recent times, we have made strides to an extent that close to 70% of the budget has been financed by resources that we are generating from within the country. And scaling up the ambition to push it to 82% is the right way to go, especially if you look at what is happening in the environment under which we are operating. So development aid is on the decline. Most of the cooperating partners are now opting more for trade that is mutually beneficial, and like the arrangement of always giving aid to developing countries. And that in itself is sending a signal that most of the countries need to start thinking inwardly in terms of how they can take care of their problems on their own without the over-reliance on donors to come through for them. And that is what the 81 or 82% might be representing in our interpretation at the Center for Trade Policy and Development. But it is also important to pay particular attention to the details with regards to where those resources are earmarked to come from.
All right.
I think part of that debate is a debate that the DG for the Zambia Revenue Authority attempted to respond to during the symposium yesterday, where there has been growing complaints and concerns from the public that we have a number of people that are in the formal sector contributing significantly towards the estimated revenues. And if you look at the positioning in terms of what people are contributing to, it still stands that a significant portion does still come through from people that are in active employment through taxes such as pay as you earn. Even if in terms of positioning you might find it in the second position, it does remain quite significant. And the core from our end at the Center for Trade Policy and Development is that we need to continue aggressively working towards diversifying the pool from which we mobilize these resources. Companies need to be brought into the space, those that are not paying taxes, those that are not captured, so that ultimately the burden in terms of financing development is evenly shared.
All right, this is the 2026 budget analysis program, and my guest on today's program, I do have the executive director from Center for the Trade Policy and Development, and this is Mr. Isaac Mwaipopo, and we're looking at a very interesting topic, which is economic stability, sustainability. And the number that we are using, if you wish to take part on today's program, is 0978 772801. That's our text message line, 0978 772801. We'll be able to read out your text message and let us know where you are listening us from and watching us from. Remember, this program is both live both on television and radio. So shortly I'll be able to read your messages, and those of you that are following us on our social media, that's the National Assembly of Zambia, like the page and let us know where you're watching us from if you wish to be part and parcel of today's program. My sign language interpreter is Chola Kauma. Mr. Mwaipopo, let's move on to issue to do with debt management. Yeah. How do you assess government's debt management strategy in the 2026 budget, considering the proposed domestic and external borrowing of about 34.5 billion? And what measures would you take to should the government take to make sure that debt is sustainable?
Well, from the Center for Trade Policy and Development, in the first place, besides talking about the anticipated or projected plans to borrow in 2026, would want to also place it on record in terms of our concern that the debt restructuring has actually taken long. This process has gone on for close to 4 years now, from the time that we had submitted our request to have our debt treated under the G20 common framework. And that in itself has had some repercussions in terms of some of the strides that we had started making as a country. And then the drought also came in and worsened things. It is good to note that we have almost concluded close to 95% in terms of restructuring of our debt, and that in itself will help us to have a clear sense or picture with regards to what the commitments will be looking like in terms of interest payments as well as payments of the principal loans that we have. In terms of domestic borrowing, it has actually been on the rise. We have seen government becoming a lot more active in terms of borrowing from the domestic market, and it has a downside which we have continuously tried to put out. What the downside is, it's basically that you are bringing in competition with regards to the available resources. If Isaac is a welder and he's running a business and he would want to seek capital with regards to the banks that we have, one of the things that you find yourself in is that you're competing with government. And between a small businessman and government, most of our banks would prefer to lend that money to the government for simple reasons that they know that government does have the capacity to ultimately pay back compared to maybe a businessman. And ultimately what that does is that it takes away a lot of the resources that would have potentially gone on to support the growth of the private sector, reducing some of the perceived risks that the commercial banks might have. and that in itself would also affect some of the plans that this government and subsequent governments have had with regards to trying to support the private sector to grow and have growth that is driven by the private sector. Because one of the big challenges that most of our businesses continue to face has been an issue of access to affordable finance. Okay. If you look at the type of finance that we have in the country, besides the limitations with regards to accessibility, you also find that the interest rates are very high, something which the Minister of Finance did speak to as he presented the 2026 national budget. So it remains our call from the Center for Trade Policy and Development that government will need to also start managing its appetite with regards to borrowing, especially borrowing from the domestic market, so that ultimately we can create a bit more space for our entrepreneurs who might be seeking for capital. Okay. Ultimately, if they reduce their level of appetite, you might have a situation where most of the banks might have liquidity and there are few off-takers. It also forces them to start creating incentives so that ultimately our business men and women can then apply to access those resources and plow into activities that they think can help to generate an income and be in a position to contribute towards the growth, job creation, as well as poverty agenda.
Oh, okay. Earlier on we did talk about government raising about 81 to 82% of the total budget to finance the 2026 national budget. But the biggest problem that even ZRA or the Zambian government has been facing is an issue to do with tax evasion and avoidance. If this is taken care of, I'm sure we'll have a smooth flow of revenue into the coffers of government. But how do you think the government should address the tax evasion and avoidance to achieve the 81 to 82% of revenue collection?
Indeed, tax administration in our country is faced with a number of challenges. And largely these challenges fall under the bracket of compliance as well as issues related to tax evasion. In the case of compliance, you have existing taxes that are provided for by the law, and a low-hanging fruit or a common example that mostly has been given by the Zambia Revenue Authority as well as other authorities has been speaking to issues related to rental tax. There are several landlords across the country, and there is a provision in terms of our laws on the need to be remitting taxes, but you've seen that over the years the contribution that has been coming through from that segment has been very low. And also on the part of the Zambia Revenue Authority, it doesn't seem to have well thought out strategies and taking deliberate steps that can help to improve the picture, apart from always raising the concern that compliance with regards to rental income tax remittance has been very low. So it would be very important on the part of the Zambia Revenue Authority to step up efforts in terms of enforcement on existing regulation and finding smart and cheaper ways of ensuring that ultimately there is this contribution. When it comes to tax avoidance and evasion, especially evasion, it would also be very important that we step up efforts towards conducting audits that can also help us to do assessments with regards to how adequate the taxes most of these entities that are fond of floating regulations and avoiding paying taxes. You've seen in more recent times the Zambia Revenue Authority has actually attempted to do so. We've seen a number of cases where they even go to court and they've used the litigation path to just try and ensure that in cases where they feel convinced that some of these entities, companies are evading tax, they prosecute them, take them all the way through the court process, and ultimately we've also been able to recover part of these resources. And that's what we think needs to be done. But beyond most of these companies that have been investigated, it would also be important to cast the net a bit wider and also start looking at some of the biggest culprits when it comes to tax evasion. And some of these, it's the multinational companies. Some of them are domiciled within the mining sector, and once we do reach out and using some of the expertise we have, we do think that we can add a bit more in terms of resources we can recover, those that are lost through illicit financial flows.
Okay, looking at the 2026 national budget, very inspiring, and a lot of Zambians are looking forward to how best government will maintain the 2026 national budget. And looking at where we're coming from, the biggest problem has been the fiscal discipline. Now, coming from the center, what guidance would you offer to the Ministry of Finance and the government in general to be fiscal discipline, for them to realize all these plans that they've announced to the general public, to the Zambian?
Well, there has been a demonstration of commitment in the last 2 to 3 years to ensure that there's fiscal discipline in the way we are managing our public resources. We can attribute it to a number of factors, but one of the biggest factors at play has also been associated with the fact that we are on an extended credit facility with the International Monetary Fund, and this extended credit facility comes with benchmarks and performance expectations. And part of this process is also speaking to the debt restructuring process in terms of technical support that is being provided. To some extent, it has equally contributed to the fiscal discipline we have observed. Our hope from the Center for Trade Policy and Development is that getting into 2026, we should be able to sustain that because ultimately it is for the good of our country. Though if you look at 2026, like I had mentioned earlier, it's an election year, and generally there's a big push, especially from politicians, to just try and do things that are normally meant to win elections, and that in itself can throw us out of balance. It is just our appeal to all the politicians that we should work with the technocrats in various ministries to just ensure that the correct things are done, and we don't do things out of expedience and being short-sighted, thinking through an election cycle, because ultimately there are lives involved. Resources that are lost are resources that can be plowed into our communities. They can be invested into sectors that can ultimately improve the quality of life of our people.
All right, and joining us at this particular time is the chairperson for the Public Accounts Committee, and he is Member of Parliament for Bwanamkubwa constituency, and this is Mr. Warren Mwambazi. Honorable, thank you so much for waking up early. I know there's serious traffic in Lusaka, but we're glad you could find and be with us.
Thank you so much, and first and foremost, apologies, these traffic issues, but suffice to say that good morning.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
The Minister of Finance was here last week on Friday and presented a 253 billion budget. How do you make of the 2026 national budget?
Thank you so much. First and foremost, it's a progressive budget. It looks to be a progressive budget, I must say that. But my take on the budget, first and foremost, if we look from last year's budget, or the budget which is being executed, it was a 217.
Yep.
So if you look at the gap or the increment, it's about 17%.
Yep.
From where we're at. So what are some of the dynamics? Yes, last year we had other issues, effects affecting the economy, but how do you intend to raise revenue? Because I think 80% of the budget should
81 to 82%.
Yes, it will be funded by domestic revenue. But what are some of the pragmatic plans has the government put in place to ensure that they enhance the domestic resource mobilization? Because that is what should speak to this budget. In an event that that is not achieved, the targets of ZRA and other government institutions, if it's not achieved, then our budget is hampered. Because as we speak, the donor component is very small, or cooperating partners is very small. So for me, we really have to mitigate very carefully with increments. We've seen the increments of social spending, we've seen the increments of CDF, and very good programs, I must say, CDF, cash for work. But if those programs are not funded in time, then they tend not to be good projects. I mean, good interventions. We've seen from the past few months how we've struggled, especially with cash for work, as well as CDF in terms of funding from the Treasury. We do appreciate the fiscal discipline, which is there, and also the aspects coupled with issues of debt restructuring and all that. But all those things should speak now with what we want. If the budget is done the way it's done, then how do we ensure that the budget is adequately funded, and that we can now look at the trickle down to those activities and ensure that they are funded.
You're talking about appreciating fiscal discipline, but Honorable, at the expense of development?
First and foremost, like my colleague was saying, we are coming from issues of debt restructuring. So we are being told, dig out yourself from this situation you are in. So you need now to manage your expenditure. You need to manage your appetite to borrow. Even if you go on the market, I think Zambia, if you go on the market, if someone says we are floating this from Zambia, the appetite is not that much, because we are still considered as people are trying to restructure and come out, and they now start to progress in a positive environment in terms of economic indicators. So you need to have the fiscal discipline. You have no option. Let me put it like that. You have no option, because you have these little funds, and you need to ensure that you prolong you restructure your debt. If your repayments or your are supposed to fall next year, you say, please, can you give us 3 more years? It doesn't mean you're taking out the debt, but you're just pushing it forward. You still need to plan. I think you did hear from the Minister of Finance when he was commenting about the issue of supplementary budget, where people are saying then the budget is not properly done. How can you have a supplementary budget? No, we had after restructuring debts, we needed to factor in that these will be falling due. Then we needed to start servicing them. Okay. But for me, all those probabilities and alignment, if we are structuring for debt, we should make sure that there's a provision, because we should know when it falls due. Okay, it's not a surprise that it will fall due. It's like I owe you money, and we've agreed in the next 3 months that the parcel should come. So even in my budget, in my income, my revenue, I should budget that it's going to fall due, because we are agreeing, unless we've not agreeing. But even if there's a provision, you should make your provision in an event, because the provision is just a provision. If it does not happen, there's no financial implication.
All right, we are looking at economic sustainability today, and very interesting discourse that we're having. But let me acknowledge the people that are with us on our social media. Remember, it's the National Assembly of Zambia. We have Uchizi, Enesa Uchizi, and you're saying you're watching us from the heart of Lusaka. Thank you so much. I also have somebody from Silveris, Chongwe, right here in Lusaka City, and this is Jackson Banda, Kennedy Chidubwa. You are watching us from no place there, but you can kindly also share the reporting system to the public, so that they can help to identify the companies which avoid paying tax. Earlier on, I did engage Mr. Mwaipopo there from the center. We're talking about 81 to 82% of the total budget being financed domestically. But the question was, how can we help ZRA and the Zambian government realize the issue to do with tax evasion and tax avoidance? You are in a very critical committee, Honorable Mwambazi, and this is a public accounts committee. How can government or Zambian people, government realize the 81% tax collection, and also fight tax evasion and avoidance?
Thank you so much, Apostle, again. If you look at last year, in the budget provision, there was 321 million funded to ZRA, who came through my committee under cluster budgeting, sector budgeting, to defend that 321 million for modernization of ZRA from starters. That money is given. Then what do we look out for? How does ZRA enhance their tax collection, tax avoidance, illicit financial flows, transfer pricing, tax incentives? Those are some of the issues which will shrink our tax base. Okay, but if you look at also FDIs, foreign direct investments, we cannot do away with incentives, but we need to balance it to ensure that it does not choke our domestic resource mobilization. So for ZRA, first, if you look at first, we have the informal sector, huge informal sector. The formal sector is small but heavily taxed. So how do we give a breather and ensure that we collect more? So these are some of the dynamics apart from the tax avoidance. If you look at tax, where does our most tax come from? The mining sector. That is where we apart from the other tax, is a mining sector. But we have a lot of people, other communities. I cannot mention. ZRA has come to make a presentation even before our committee, and they've highlighted people who've been avoiding taxes. But how do we ensure now that we compel them? There's been a lot of litigation. Yeah. There's been a lot of some have ended up paying after being taken to court. But suffice to say that we need to ensure that also the informal sector, we see how we barricade it, we see how we digitalize it to ensure that we can also get some form of a revenue from that aspect. So it's not only on one-sided, because I think from our Zambian perspective, every time we talk about tax, it's a mines. The mines are not giving us enough. Okay? Mines can also only give us enough when we give them enough environment to ensure that they do their business. But do we have adequate electricity for them to ramp up production? No. But then how do we get more taxes? Because their production is hampered as well. Okay. So these are some of the dynamics we need to balance. If you look at our effects of the 8th National Development Plan vis-a-vis mining, is a mining. We had a meeting with the World Bank. They were talking about Zambia cannot attract more investment as it is supposed to be, because if you look at the SOEs which are involved in mining, such as ZCCMIH, IDC, the investment vehicle, they don't give a detailed, adequate information. That's why government has come up probably with an intervention of aerial mapping, so that they can ensure that we can know what is endowed in the country, and maybe probably people we can put up that information and people can come to invest. But much to say that even if that is done, we need to have a proper a legal framework to ensure now that we harness and manage, because issues of illicit financial flows, it's a moving goalpost. We are dealing with highly sophisticated people who their role just sit to start to do their tax planning. How do we ensure that we don't pay tax?
Okay. Let me bring in Mr. Mwaipopo. 2 days before the presentation of the 2026 national budget by the Minister of Finance, you held a presser, and you also outlined some of your expectations that you needed: mining, agriculture, trade. Has it met your aspirations or your wish list as center?
Not all of them.
I like the smile.
Not all of them. So I can isolate one, the Constituency Development Fund. I think from the Center for Trade Policy and Development, we were of a position that government should not add more resources to the Constituency Development Fund in the current framing, looking at some of the challenges that have existed in the implementation of the Constituency Development Fund. We think that government hasn't done enough in terms of providing technical and administrative support in the implementation of the Constituency Development Fund. And we also think that there have been challenges related to delayed disbursements of actual resources. So if in a 12-month period you have not been able to fully exhaust or finish 36 million, what is the guarantee that getting into 2026, where we'll have elections in August, what is the guarantee that you manage to exhaust and do meaningful projects under a 40 million? The 40 million isn't a bad thing per se, but ultimately in the past 4 years we should have also done enough to back CDF with meaningful support so that ultimately the utilization of resources is fast-tracked and we can see meaningful projects that are done in most of our communities, because left unchecked, that's where you have a number of projects that are commissioned, lack of supervision, poor quality, and ultimately who loses out? It's a taxpayer that contributes to the revenue basket, and that money now leaks through some of those administrative challenges.
Okay.
But there are a number of other areas that were met. Domestic resource mobilization agenda is a big thing for us. We do think that we need to move in that direction. We can't continue depending on others to give us handouts in a country that has got minerals. And if you look at now, there is an energy transition and there is a growing demand for critical minerals. Zambia, Zimbabwe, DRC happen to be among the few countries within Southern Africa that have got those minerals. Okay.
All right, but no, at a later stage, I would want you also to comment on the increment in the CDF allocation to various constituencies that we have in the country, from 36.1 to 40 million kwacha. But before we do that, we are looking at a very interesting topic today, where we're looking at economic sustainability. And let's move on to the macroeconomic objectives that the minister laid out during his presentation of the 2026 national budget. He did say that to build economic resilience and improve the livelihoods of the people of Zambia, the Zambian government has set the following macroeconomic objectives for 2025. Attain a real GDP growth rate of 6.6%, reduce inflation to the 6.8% target band in the medium term, and maintain international service above 3.0 months of import cover, increase domestic revenue to at least 21.3% of GDP, reduce a fiscal deficit to 3.1% of GDP, and limit net domestic borrowing to 1.6% of GDP. Your comment on it?
Thank you so much, Paulson. Very, I think, good macro, I think, projections and indicators, and suffice to say that a progressive economy should look at such economic indicators, but then how do we attain them? Because we have to look at where we're coming from. Sometimes I've got this philosophy that we can have these forecasts, and what if they're not attainable, then they are meaningless. That's the thing. But what the minister is talking about, we're looking at the transition, where we're coming from. Okay, issues of our domestic resource mobilization, issues of inflation. We've seen a drastic, we've seen a movement, 12.6 to 12.3, but we want to see much more. So what are some of these issues we need to plug in to ensure that we balance, we have seamless, and also we see maybe probably we move to the single digit in terms of inflation. Then that now starts to, because even if you look at,
is that attainable, a single digit?
It's attainable, but where we are at currently, I think it's a very difficult situation. Okay, if you have a limited basket, okay, in terms of what you can spend, and you've also got this debt which you are carrying with, so we need to really balance. Those are things we're talking about, to say then how do we balance to ensure that we get more revenue locally, domestic, okay, which will sustain the budget, which will sustain the economy. We limit borrowing, because these things have to balance. Okay, so you come up with those indicators, very good at progressive, but tell us the roadmap on how you can ensure that you balance some of these issues. I think I did earlier speak of issues of load shedding. Okay, how do we ensure that we collect more from mining if we're not giving them sufficient power? Okay, we've got other power companies which are importing and selling to the mine, but it's not sufficient. So what is a roadmap to ensure that we attain that? So those are some of the pragmatic issues which we need when we sit down. From where we're coming from, I like to refer where we're coming from, our budget, what were our indicators, what is our GDP, what is the growth, where are we going to, is this now 6.6 or 6 attainable? Is it achievable in the long run? What is the timeline for us, and what are some of these benchmarks we've put in place to ensure that we achieve that GDP? Sometimes it's good to be realistic. I call it to be realistic, because we look at our situation. Where are we going to? Can we achieve? Yes. It's also good to be ambitious.
Okay, let me bring in Mr. Maipopo. Your comment on these indicators?
So most of the targets are realistic, except inflation. For the past 5 years, I think I did make mention that in terms of our budget analysis, we're actually trying to take a deep dive into the 5 years of the current administration, and we've observed that inflation, our target has continued to be 6 to 8 throughout the 5 years. But if you look at where we end up as the year closes, we have been far off from that target. It would also be good that we should be coming up with realistic figures, knowing that if the inflation is around 15, then we should also maybe be aiming 8 to 10, and knowing that that's what we are aiming towards. With regards to growth, remember for 2025, the estimates or projections are that we might grow our economy to 5. The estimates are even estimating 6. So to estimate moving to 6.4 is very realistic, but it will also depend on how we resolve the energy crisis. We have an energy crisis, and if you look at the measures that government has provided in the 2025-26 national budget, most of them it doesn't have control. It's most of issues of saying we create an enabling environment, we go for independent power purchase agreements, and almost all of those are dependent on the pace at which those potential investors might secure resources and set up that investment. And if you look at the energy mix, it's not all the projects that can be done in a short period of time. The hydro option takes longer, 4 to 7 years. If you go for thermal, it's shorter. Within 12 months, you can have a plant that can be functioning. If you go for solar, within 6 to 12 months. So it depends with which ones might come on board faster. But from the look of things, even when you look at the FDI inflows as of last year, we seem to be recording a lot more of foreign direct investments into the mining sector than into the energy sector. It means that despite us undertaking a number of reforms, despite the current administration signing over 100 independent power purchase agreements, there's still a problem in the energy sector.
All right, let's acknowledge the few people that we have on our socials, and this is Nana Tembo here watching us from Lusaka West in Mumbai Road. Thank you so much. We also have Young Tofa watching us from Kabwe. Thank you so much. Good to hear that Central Province is being represented. Godwin Kilazi watching from Solwezi, Northwestern Province, and I also have Hope Duncan Zulu. You are saying limit borrowing, and think they concur with what Mr. Maipopo was talking about. And we have about 2 to 3 minutes to wind up now. What key drivers of economic growth in the 2026 budget, and how will the government ensure that the budgeted amount translates into tangible economic benefits for all Zambians? Honorable.
Thank you so much, Apostle. Again, like my colleague was saying, I think first and foremost, we really need to ensure that even as we propagate, especially in the energy mix, that we propagate more of the private sector driven, but we should also have, because if government has no control, most of these programs, they come but they don't reach the financial closure where now the project starts to yield results. So that is very, very important, because if you look at what is our major cash cow in terms of taxes, where do we get most of the money? It's the mining sector. So we need to ensure that yes, the current government has tried to have a consistent tax policy to push in these places, but where are we missing it? If it's energy, let's have ensure that we have a proper framework on how government can also fully participate on some of these programs to ensure that even what we want to achieve, the vision 2030 in terms of production of 3 million metric tons of copper is achieved, because that translates to much more taxes for us, much more revenue for us. And look, we are saying our budget, even moving forward, should be funded through domestic revenue. Okay. Issues of government service bars, other sectors, how we can have more revenue. We close in all those loopholes. But suffice to say that the major issue is to ensure that we have enough power, whatever power mix, because solar is not very sustainable. And if you look at all these grids we are making, you find during the day they've signed the power purchase agreement with ZESCO for 100 megawatts. During the night they cannot store power. They are at 16, they are at 20. Then they are forced to pay back because they have to compensate, because ZESCO has already committed that 100 to where they're selling to them. So these are some of the economic factors we should look at to ensure that we push and stabilize, and we can now achieve that budget which is driven mostly by domestic resource.
Mr. Maipopo, under a minute, your contribution.
So I'll just go on the point that Honorable has mentioned. The ambitions have been shared, the targets have been given, but we have to emphasize resolving the energy crisis will give life to most of these ambitions, because energy is speaking to the manufacturing sector, energy is speaking to the ambitious target of raising our production from the current 800,000 to 3.1 million metric tons. If we do not resolve the energy crisis, we might have serious challenges in terms of meeting some of those commitments that we have, and it might also start affecting some of the macroeconomic indicators such as our exchange rate, because we'll be forced to start importing and bringing in power so that we can supply the energy, the manufacturing, mining sector, and as a result we'll again start paying out a lot more dollars. And even this stability that we've experienced in the last few months, we might go back again to that instability, which also feeds into petroleum products and things like that.
As we leave, your take on the 40 million allocation to your constituents as Bwana Mkubwa. I know you've been active on social media and posting some of the developmental projects that you've done in your constituents. Not too long ago we were in your constituents just to showcase some of these projects, and I'm glad to see that some of those projects that we saw at foundation level have been commissioned in your constituents.
Thank you so much, Apostle, and we are grateful to the President, His Excellency Mr. Akainde Ichilema, for the increment. But remember my earlier point, which also my colleagues stressed. First, for me, I think what a good program, should be consistently also funded for it to achieve that which the government wants it to achieve. Apart from that, we can have a very good program, pushing from increment from 36.1 to 40 million. But if we don't have a funding consistently funded, then you find that we are going to we are not going to achieve such an objective for that program. So all things being equal, it's a very good program. Our people are appreciating, but it should be properly funded. And also we did mention earlier, even before we started implementation, issues of capacity, which he was talking about. I think that was my earlier issue, even with the Secretary to Cabinet. He said, no, we're going to push capacity, let's start. But you see, we've seen the issues which has emanated from some of these implementation process. But we are very grateful. Let's keep streamlining it to ensure that it achieves that what we want as a government, to ensure that our people can benefit through CDF, because it's a game changer.
Mr. Maipopo, as we wind up, your take on the 2026 national budget as your conclusion.
So the success of the 2026 national budget lies in actual implementation. A number of progressive measures have been put forward. We are happy that the recognition in terms of the potential challenge we might have in the health sector as a result of the pull-out of funding, there's a response. Close to 30% in terms of actual allocation for the health budget has been added, but besides that, we should always know that it still falls below the expected threshold in terms of percentage that the health sector should take in the budget.
Okay.
And to fully execute, we should all remember as citizens that it's not entirely the responsibility of government. We all need to play a part. Those that need to pay taxes, those that are entrusted with the responsibility of using our money, they should use it properly so that ultimately it can benefit all of us, and ultimately it will lead us to having a country that we can all call home with pride.
All right, Honorable, I know you're very busy. Your committee will be, in a few minutes' time, will start scrutinizing the 2026 national budget sector by sector. Your concluding remarks.
Thank you so much, Naposen, and I think it's very, very important that we work together, both private and government, to ensure that we achieve what has been outlined in the budget in terms of I like to always talk about domestic resource mobilization, and I'm happy that the budget is 8% plus based on that, and I think I should have ZI appearing and other ministries before our committee, and these are some of the things we tend to interrogate and talk about, to look at how realistic are some of these projections, can we achieve them, what do we need to put in place, what have they put in place, then together we can ensure that we achieve that, because it's good for the country, it's not only good for the government, because we're in this environment also even as members of parliament. How do we ensure that CDF 40 million is funded? Is to ensure that it's collected. How do we ensure that it's collected? How enabling is environment? What are some of these very, very important probabilities ZRA has put in place, and other quasi-government institutions which are revenue-based, to ensure that we collect more and ensure that we feed into the budget, as it were.
All right, well, thank you so much for finding time and being with us on this platform. Mr. Maipopo, we'll say thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
As we leave, I should also just acknowledge the people that have been following us on our social media. That's Dennis Chipili, following us. No name, you're just saying that those are sound submissions, and Kafua is also being represented by Christopher Hatembo. Mafi Musala, you are watching from Mombala village right here in Southern Province, and Achilolo Katumba Lotex, you're saying Honorable Warren Mwambazi Bwana Mkubwa, Member of Parliament, saying pray for 2026 you should be a cabinet minister. Warren Chisha Mwambazi MP will be in the cabinet, is of that sound mind. Some kudos there coming from Acholo. They are predicting, or they are saying you should be in cabinet. But we'll leave it there and we'll see what 2026 holds for us. I must say thank you so much for those of you that have been following us on our socials, and those of you that have been following us on our radio platform, and indeed on our TV platform. Today we were looking at economic sustainability. My two guests that I had on the program was Mr. Warren Chisha Mwambazi, who is a Member of Parliament for Bwana Mkubwa. He is a chairperson of the Public Accounts Committee here at Parliament, and Mr. Isaac Maipopo, who is Executive Director from the Center for Trade Policy and Development. My sign language interpreter has been Chola Kauma, saying thank you so much. We do have a live committee coming up at 9:30 thereabout. My name is Paulson Tindovi. On behalf of the entire production crew, we're back tomorrow with yet another sector that will looking at the 2026 national budget. Keep watching and listening to Parliament.